Hey everybody, today I can finally tell you how the new Audi S5 drives. If you haven't checked out the first video where I take a deep dive into everything from style, design, to the engine lineup, to the new infotainment systems and the active safety systems, be sure and check that video out. Without further ado, let's just get this out on the road and talk about why you might want this over last year's A5 or S5. Unfortunately, down here in Southern California, I have not been able to spend any time in the new A5. Instead, my time has been spent in this, the most fun version, the S5. And this is definitely more fun than the regular version because it's faster, stops shorter, and of course handles better thanks to that trick axle in the back. If you haven't watched the first video where we dive deeper into that, here's the summary. This model, in our testing down here, ran 0 to 60 in 4.8 seconds, 60 to 0 thanks to the wide sticky tires, just 101 feet. But what's more interesting about the S5 is the trick axle in the back. It's a torque vectoring unit and it is now standard. In the past, in some Audi S models, it has been optional. They've actually decided to make that standard in every version of this. And I think that was the right way to go because Audis have sometimes been accused of feeling a little bit front heavy. And depending on the road we're talking about, this still can feel that way sometimes. Remember that the engine is sitting entirely in front of the front axle, but this is not a front power biased vehicle. Most of the power is still going to the back. And the combination of this really quick shifting DCT transmission, or well, DCT because that would be redundant, and the torque vectoring axle in the back mean that this can cut a corner better than really any Audi sedan has been able to outside of the RS line. Unfortunately, the suburban roads that we're on right now are not the best place to highlight that capability, but earlier today I was on some windier sections of road and you can really feel the rear end rotating around in a way that, again, you could only really do in those higher performance Audi models, and this has brought that ability down to more reasonable prices because it's standard on this model. Of course, reasonable in air quotes because this is still a relatively expensive model. But it does put this in sharper, direct competition to a BMW 3 Series, something like an M340i. This may not be the most exciting stretch of roadway, but it is a good place to talk about the transmission. Audi again uses a DCT in all versions of the A5, S5, Q5, and SQ5 for 2025. DCTs have been accused of having poor performance in slow and go or stop and go type situations because we don't have a torque converter. So if I stop here and then I want to creep forward, it has to actually slip the clutch, kind of like a manual transmission. And DCTs, especially dry DCTs, where the clutch is dry, it's not swimming in an oil bath, definitely can be herky-jerky. And this is not like that at all. In fact, this feels very much like a regular automatic transmission in all of these suburban or urban type driving situations. Where you are going to notice a bit of a difference between this and a regular automatic transmission is when you're doing really quick starts. So say, for instance, we just stop for one moment here in traffic and then I floor it. You're going to notice that that clutch engagement takes just a little bit. Rather than building up pressure like a torque converter does, you get a different feel in this than, say, something like an M340i. And that means that if you're the kind of person that wants to break torque at a stoplight, you're not going to get that same benefit in this. In fact, it will actually reduce your 0 to 60 time in our testing. This one went 4.9 seconds when we tried that little trick. But despite that, I think this transmission is an excellent fit for this vehicle because of how rapidly a DCT can shift and how smooth these shifts really are. Versus the average 8-speed automatic in this segment, or something like the Mercedes 9-speed automatic in the C-Class, definitely versus that Mercedes automatic, these transmission shifts are crisp and they're really, really fast. Whether you're using the paddles here for manual shifting, or whether you're letting the transmission do its own thing, you will definitely notice how rapid the shifts can be. In addition to improved performance, DCTs also promise improved fuel efficiency, especially out on the open highway like we're on here. That's due not just to the fact that we don't have a torque converter, but also to the gear set design that we find in dual clutch transmissions like this. Of course, if you really cared about fuel economy, you'd probably be looking at a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid, something along those lines. And of course, Audi has a full suite of electric vehicles on sale now and more coming soon. So if you really were interested in efficiency, there's some other options out there. But I do appreciate the combination of features. This means that you can get higher performance and the really slick shifting transmission, but you're not really giving up that much. You're also not giving up when it comes to ride quality because the roads out here in Orange County are not the best, especially in some of those roads we were on earlier. And even in the dynamic mode, this has a really good balance to it. You can really thank the adaptive suspension system for that. The adaptive suspension has 3 different levels. We have dynamic, which I've spent most of my time in. It's adjustable with this Audi Drive Select, and you don't have to go with the regular drive modes. You can do it independently in the individual drive mode. Balanced is, quite logically, a balanced mode. That's for sort of daily driving. But I have to admit, I would probably spend most of my time in the comfort mode, which I just engaged here, because it really is surprisingly comfortable. But like dynamic not being rock hard, comfort is not exactly floaty boaty. I think they did a really good job with the damping in this suspension. It feels kind of like some Audi EVs in a way, where it makes the vehicle feel not just more comfortable, but also perhaps a little bit bigger, a little bit more substantial, if that's what you're into, of course. The last thing we should talk about is cabin noise. Audi says that they have spent a lot of time quieting the cabin down, and I think it does show, especially if we're in the comfort mode where the V6 burble is a little bit reduced inside. Even though we have 255 with tires on this model, the cabin wind noise, road noise, etc. are really well controlled. Now, acoustic laminated front glass, that is standard. Acoustic laminated side glass, that's optional. I will apologize if I have accidentally called this a Q5 or an SQ5 at any point in this video. I am driving the S5 and the Q5 today back to back, and for some reason I keep tripping over those names because they both have 5 in the name. And of course, they're both closely related to one another. So if you want to know about that Q5, be sure and check out those videos coming up soon. There's going to be a walk around video and a drive video, just like I did with this, because the embargo release dates for the walk around video where I can show you what it looks like inside, and the video where I can talk about how it actually is to live with and drive, those dates are unfortunately reasonably far apart, so I decided to make 4 separate videos, so I apologize if anything is confused. We haven't had a great deal of time with these separate vehicles down here in Southern California. So pardon my notes, but let's talk about how much this guy is going to set you back. Well, it's on sale now in May of 2025. It's going to start at $49,700 plus that pesky destination charge of nearly $1,300. That's about $4,000 more than a comparable BMW 3 Series, about $7,000 more than Volvo's S60, which has of course sailed off into the sunset. The truth is there are fewer sedans in this segment than ever before, and I wouldn't be surprised if Lexus finally ditched the IS at some point soon. So it's a shrinking pool, and that's part of why prices have gone up. But also, we find more power, more standard equipment, more refinement, and better fuel economy in every model versus last year. You're gonna have to pay for some of the better features though. If you want the Prestige trim, which has some of what we saw in this model, that's $56,150 plus destination. Fully loaded, an A5 will get up to $58,840, including the destination charge. But what if you wanted an S5 like this? Well, it's gonna start at least at $62,700 plus that $1,295 destination charge, and will go on up to $81,240. So definitely a pretty penny, and more expensive than a BMW M340i. Is it worth the extra cost? That is a bit tricky when we're talking about that M340i, but it is bigger, it is more cargo practical, and I think that the classic complaints about Audi have all but vanished. Yes, it is still a little bit heavier in the front than something like that BMW or the comparable Mercedes model, but it's not a big difference, and you'd be really hard-pressed to tell out on your favorite winding mountain road. Instead, what you're gonna notice is the really well-tuned suspension, the steering, and of course that torque vectoring axle in the back. For everything though, be sure and stay tuned because hopefully we'll have one of these at home for a complete review just as soon as possible. And at that point in time, we'll have better ability to directly compare this to the options that remain in the United States. Remember, again, there aren't very many options out there in this segment, and it is a weird evolving segment where this replaces 2 models in Audi's lineup. So not only has some car companies abandoned the segment, Audi themselves decided to merge things back into just one vehicle. See all of you next week.